This video is going to cover the 3 different fingerings for B flat, how to notate them in your music, and also how to decide which fingering is best for a different passage of music. Let's get started. Just as a quick note, the 3 fingerings that we'll be discussing in this video only apply to the B flat or A sharp in the staff and the one that's directly above the staff by one ledger line. There is only one fingering used for high B flat or high A sharp, which is shown here. So first, what are the 3 fingerings for B flat? The first fingering is thumb B flat, which is the most commonly used fingering for B flat. I have a whole video that explains how to use thumb B flat, and I'll link that in the description below. This is what the fingering looks like. The second most common fingering for B flat is lever B flat. Now, if you want to find the lever on your flute, you should put your finger on the F key, right? So your right hand index finger, and then just lean it slightly towards the head joint, okay? And you should find this lever right here. Now, my flute also has a C sharp lever, right? But everyone's flute has this A sharp or B flat lever. So we use this just like we would use the 1 and 1 B flat, but you're going to finger 1 thumb and then the lever instead of using this first finger for B flat. Just as a quick warning, make sure that you don't confuse the trill keys with the lever. Again, you'll find the lever by putting your finger on the F key and then going up towards the head joint, not towards the foot. When you use the A sharp lever, you want to make sure that you are hitting it with the side of your finger. Okay? You don't have to go all the way back like this, because this is going to contort your hand and it's not going to be efficient to use. But you're just going to hit it with the side. You want to keep it kind of close to that F key. And that leads me to the last fingering for B flat, and that is 1 and 1 pinky thumb. All right, that is what I call baby B flat or 1 and 1 B flat. This fingering is most often taught in beginning band method books. However, it's the least used of the B flat fingerings for intermediate and advanced players. So why is it the first fingering that most flutists learn for B flat? It's hard to say exactly how this tradition developed. However, it's likely due to the design evolution of the flute. The thumb B flat key wasn't added until later, after the invention of the modern flute fingering system. I think it's fine to use this as the first fingering for B flat. However, I would encourage to move away from this fingering as you get more advanced in your flute studies. Since we have 3 different ways of playing B flat, it's important to know how to notate in your music which version of B flat you're going to be playing. So, I have used these 3 symbols to help me differentiate between the 3 versions of B flat. The first is for thumb B flat. I use a T with a flat sign at the bottom or a T with a natural sign, and that tells me whether it's thumb B flat or thumb B natural. For the lever, I use the kind of no set or empty set symbol, and that just shows you that you're going to use the lever for that note. Finally, the first finger B flat or the 1 and 1 B flat or baby B flat, I use that one. When I use it, I write just first above the note. I would encourage you to get in the habit of writing in these different notations, especially when you are going back and forth or when you're just learning these 3 different fingerings. Now, the most important part of this, how do we decide which fingering for B flat we're going to use? Well, let's look at all 3 of them and the cases when we would use them and when we would not. First up, we have thumb B flat. Thumb B flat is the most frequently used fingering for B flat for most flutists. It should be used as your main fingering for B flat. All the other fingerings should just serve as alternates. Now, we use thumb B flat most often in flat keys that don't have C flat in the key signature. So like G flat major, C flat major. We want to use them in keys that are flat keys, but just not those last two that have 6 and 7 flats in them. You want to make sure that you are not using thumb B flat when you're doing chromatic passages. So if you have a piece that has a lot of B naturals or chromatic motion, you're probably not going to use thumb B flat for that piece, or just you're going to have to flip back and forth between those. However, never use it. We don't slide between thumb B flat and thumb B natural. Again, this is why it's so important to notate the fingering that you're going to use for B flat. Next, let's look at the uses for the lever B flat. Now, this one is most often used in chromatic scales. So when you're learning your chromatic scale, you want to learn it with the lever actually. You can learn it with that 1 and 1 B flat, but it's really a better fingering. The lever is a better fingering for those chromatic scales. When I was going through the beginning method for flute by Rubank, I learned that this was the A sharp lever. And I just sort of equated A sharp to be played with that fingering. Now, this has a lot of validity because when we're playing in a piece that has A sharps in it, most likely it's also going to have B naturals in it. So because of that, we're not going to want to switch back and forth by using the thumb. So instead, we would use that lever. Finally, when would we use the first finger B flat? This one is a little bit more complicated and it's so rarely used. It's kind of amazing that we teach this one first to many beginners. But I think that that's kind of a historical thing and there's lots of different reasons why that happens. But as you become a more advanced flutist, you want to look and carefully choose your fingerings so that it makes the most efficient use of your technique. In music, you want to use the 1 and 1 B flat when you can't use thumb B flat because it might, you have a bunch of B naturals and B flats in a row, and you have a note before and or after the B flat that uses this fourth finger. So if you're going from, for example, from an F to a B flat, it makes sense to use that fingering because you're not moving that as many fingerings. If we did F to lever, you see how I have to do that awkward motion because this finger is already on the F key. Same thing applies if you're going from E to B flat. This is a lot easier than, for example, going to the lever. That's really awkward to do. It's possible, but it's definitely more awkward. And again, we want to keep things as efficient as possible with the fingers. In the description below, I have a worksheet that shows several different examples, many of which are taken from the Rubank Selected Studies book, which I know is very popular for all state etudes. I encourage you to go through the examples with your flute in hand and see how the different fingerings work in different contexts. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks for watching and happy practicing.